Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences. Demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Introducing the new DigiCert. As the leading provider of high-assurance SSL, TLS, and PKI certificates, DigiCert is all about improving security across the web and IoT. DigiCert is committed to helping customers and partners successfully deploy identity, authentication, and encryption solutions. They'll even help you figure out which certificate you need to secure your web domains, apps, devices, and more. Check out the Cert Wizard tool under the SSL tab on digicert.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Before we dive into our next interview, I want to remind our listeners and viewers that we will be at Black Hat and DEF CON, and at each conference we'll be in the respective pool areas at Mandalay Bay and Caesar's Palace, and we will have our own cabana, bungalow, tent, gazebo,
bordello,
that's a good one. I'm writing that down. Bordello. We'll be there. We will have some type of structure, and we'll be handing out the Cyber Hero Adventures comic book, which we have a little thing on the inside cover. We want you to come and get those and take those to your friends and family and coworkers, because it's a comic book about how to basically increase your cybersecurity for individuals and maybe those that work for companies. It's an awesome comic book. Gary Berman and Security Weekly have partnered to distribute these at Black Hat and DEF CON. We will also be in the vendor area at DEF CON, as always, as we have been for the past several years. This year, we're going to be selling Hack Naked t-shirts, Security Weekly shot glasses. We've got some really cool knockoff Gunner computer glasses that I think are going to be on sale for like $10, dude. And Gunners are like what, $40 to $70?
More than $10.
More than $10, right? These have the Security Weekly logo on the side. So I think it's nice if you want to test out and see if they work for you. Like, you know, they're $10, so you don't have to make the full commitment. Now, if you've used the cheaper ones, like don't come buy one from us. Gunner usually has a thing there. Like, go buy the nice ones if you really like them. I've done the comparison. The Gunners are a little nicer. They do make the screen easier to read than the $10 ones, but the $10 ones are way better than looking at it without the glasses.
And
so I've done
10% less blindness than last year.
Yes. They
vastly reduced that. From the past,
reduced that. Anyway.
No animals were harmed, though. We used humans.
We did. We used all humans in our testing. That was actually me that tested. Anyway, so make sure you do that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see everyone out there who is attending. Chris Spehn is here with us. He is at Conscious Hacker on Twitter. He is a consultant on Mandiant's Red Team, formerly a penetration tester for major credit card companies and retailers. Chris gave one of the keynotes at Circle City Con. It has an open source project that he's going to tell you about tonight. Chris, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's nice to see you in person and have you on the show this evening, Chris. Now, you have a project that is involved. It's called Great SCT, and it's a framework as part of Metasploit to bypass common antivirus and whitelisting solutions. My first question for you, Chris, is how did you come up with this idea? Like, what happened to lead you to be one of the co-creators, right? There are other contributors other than yourself to this project.
It's kind of a long story.
We want to hear it.
We have time.
Yeah, it was a bright, sunny Colorado morning. I had just taken the Creative Red Team training course from Mandiant internally that we typically give at Black Hat. I had learned all the things, thought I was surely prepared for my first Red Team engagement as an active participant. No longer just doing pen testing.
This was like you get hired as a Mandiant Red Teamer, you just finished training. This is your very first pen test that you're doing for a Mandiant client.
Well, very first Red Team for a Mandiant client.
Gotcha.
I had done pen tests for them previously, but very first red team for a Mandiant client.
And the whole point of red team is to be stealthy, not get caught, and really do the adversary simulation.
Yeah, I would say the point of a red team is really to detect the organization's ability to detect and to respond to things, rather than being super stealthy all the time, at least in my own humble opinion.
Important to the story. Continue.
Yeah, so, at the time we were getting ready to do phishing, and if I recall correctly, the email phishing didn't really work out. We did some phone social engineering. We actually did get in. It went as expected. But our beacons died because we were using Cobalt Strike, and the terminology there is beacon versus shell. And, we couldn't exactly figure out why. I was checking the logs for Apache and noticed, a Linux user agent hit our web server, but, they weren't pulling down the HTML application, which was, I was like, well, that's kind of strange. Like, Linux agent probably shouldn't be able to hit this in the first place, so that's the first mistake I made. And then, I see another user agent hit it, and virus total is in it. Shortly after that, in our global
when you upload a malware sample to VirusTotal, it actually executes that malware and had left a log entry in your callback server.
Yes, but the way we do things, it never exposed our true command and control. It exposed the redirector that we were using, which we adjusted from there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, VirusTotal, they were trying to pull down. They didn't pull down the HTML application, and eventually they did with VirusTotal user agent, and then in our global red team chat, Nick Carr from the FireEye Advanced Practices team asked, is anyone doing a red team for X client? Me and the other guy doing it were pretty new to the company. I had been around a little longer, so I stepped up and said, yeah, unfortunately, that's me. And we chatted a bit, and he's like, well, I just burned all your tradecraft. So I'm like, oh, man, this is my first red team as an active participant at Mandiant. Like, things aren't going so well. I was so confident, thought I was prepared. We got in right away, but then we got caught. And so I was in the Denver Mandiant office at the time, and the person that sat across from me at that time was Casey Smith, also known as Sub T on Twitter. And so I let out a big sigh, and I looked forward and I said, Casey, I'm sorry. I just burned all your tradecraft. That was a very hard thing for me to do at the time because I was learning so much from that particular individual, and he was teaching me all about Reg Cert 32 and COM scriptlets. And Casey replied, no, it's Spehn, that's okay. Give me like 15, 20 minutes. Let me do some research. Maybe we can come up with something new to use on this engagement for you. I said, okay, well, if you don't mind, can I shoulder surf you and ask questions and see what you're doing? He said, sure, no problem. So I went around my desk and started shoulder surfing Casey. He slowly started to remove components from the COM scriptlet, which is essentially an XML file. So he slowly started to remove tags from it to minimize it. It was really close to getting it, and I said, I think you're making a syntactical mistake here. I said, yeah, maybe you're right. Give me 10 minutes to kind of zone out with headphones on. I said, okay, cool, so I left him alone for 10, 15 minutes, came back into the office, and he goes, Spehn, you were right. I got it to work. And that's how the minimalist COM scriptlet was born for RegSurf 32, which is in use by a threat actor that FireEye labels APT32. And they're primarily politically motivated, although, I'm not here to talk about APT32 today.
Right, but essentially you uncovered a technique for bypassing protections that both worked for you, and then later found out also the evil attackers in the real world were also using.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't me. It was really like a team effort, and I would really give all the credit to Casey Smith, to be honest, since he's the one that actually did it. Sure, I was there. I shoulder surfed. It's how it happens. It's a true story. But really, all credit goes to him. He's the one that does the research.
Casey's awesome too. He's made appearances on the show as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
So then what? So then you're like, let's create an open source project and take this to the next level?
Yeah, so I was also working with Chris Trunzer from the Vale framework at the time, and really it was kind of his idea.
You got some really smart friends, Chris.
Well, I would attribute that to joining Mandiant. I just kind of joined them. I was in the right place at the right time. I knew I wanted to work for one of the top InfoSec consulting firms, go back to a security company because I used to work for Spider Labs. And that's the job I enjoyed the most. So I started looking. I won't mention like other companies that I was talking to, but I would say I didn't align with them as much. Mm-hmm. And I knew I was going to be working with Chris Trunzer at the time that I joined Mandiant. He's no longer working for Mandiant, however. But I was really excited to work with him and other individuals. And then maybe like a month or two after I had been there, Casey joined the team. And again, Casey is no longer with Mandiant as well. He works for Red Canary now. But I just feel like I was in the right place at the right time. I got kind of lucky. But yeah, so like to answer your question, it was really like he would probably tell you otherwise, to be honest. But it was all Chris Trunzer's idea to kind of develop a framework for application whitelist bypassers. Because we kind of ran into this issue with clients where they would ask us, how do I test the efficacy of my application whitelist policy? Mm-hmm. And, how do you answer that question? Because there's nothing really available to do that. You have to be a highly technical person that's staying on top of the research done by folks like Casey and Matt Graber, Matt Nelson. I can name a ton of people there that are doing fantastic work. But it's highly technical research, and not everyone can go in and go ahead and weaponize these payloads immediately and employ different techniques within the research that they've done. So it was one of those things where I had a client ask me that, and I didn't have a good answer for them until I started developing this framework. I mean, now we have things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is not exactly related to application whitelist bypasses, but or like strictly focusing on application whitelisting, but at least it's something out there for a common taxonomy. And so linking that back up with application whitelisting can be beneficial as well. But really, like, I just haven't have a good answer for clients. It was just like, I don't know, keep hiring us, and we'll do it for you. I'm not sure. Like, it's a difficult problem to solve since it's such a highly technical area, and the ability to understand the research requires a certain level of fundamental knowledge to be able to start utilizing it. So it's not like every analyst within every corporation or small business even would be capable of going and taking, Casey or Graber's or some new research that comes out and employing it in a way, utilizing it in a way that'll be beneficial for to audit their application whitelist policy, or to audit, their EDR products capabilities, or maybe just to audit their capability to detect and respond to something.
Mm. And so tell us about the Great SCT framework. Like, how is it implemented? What's it written in? How do we start working with it?
So Great Scott, that's how you pronounce it, or how I pronounce it.
Sorry.
Great yes. SCT or Great Scott.
You are the definitive source on how to pronounce that one, since it's partly your product. Project.
I think even in the GitHub README, it might say it's pronounced Great Scott, or maybe I removed that. I don't remember.
I could have very likely missed it. So
yeah, it would be easy to miss. But anyway, it's on GitHub, github.com/greatsct. It's a GitHub organization that you can go to. It's written in Python 3. Specifically, it requires Python 3.6 and above due to some of the invoke obfuscation ports to Python use a specific library, random.choices. I should say a specific method, random.choices within Python 3.6. So Python 3.6 is required. There are some other requirements. Really, how I would describe Great Scott is it's essentially a fork of the Vale framework, written by Chris Strunzer and Will Schroeder Harmjoy. And so I forked Vale, and really the story behind this is, I was working with Chris Strunzer on an internal pen test, and after hours we were hanging out at the hotel bar, and I was showing him how what I was working on with Great Scott and everything. And this is whenever this is like the old version of Great Scott, the old framework that I had written with a coworker. And one of the things he noticed that I was running into is I was monkey patching my old coworker's framework all the time, and I didn't really understand or know how his framework worked, because there were literally comments in the framework that said, this code is intentionally obfuscated for intellectual property issues. No, really, why are you laughing? So it was pretty difficult to debug and go through. So he was telling me about how he went through the same thing with Vale, and how Will Schroeder had wrote the original framework, and he didn't really understand how it worked. So with Vale 3.0, he decided he would rewrite the entire framework portion of the tool. And then he was like, well, maybe you should just use Vale's framework. And he started explaining it to me about how there's a conductor that conducts the orchestra and within his framework and all this, and how it's designed. And I was like, yeah, that actually, it's really corny, and I'm going to make fun of you for doing that. But it all makes sense to me, and it's good. So from then, the next weekend, I had gone home, and I think that Saturday or Sunday I forked Vale. I started minimizing, taking out what I didn't need.
I'm sorry, now Chris, for our listeners, what is the purpose of Vale in contrast to the project that you created?
So Vale's purpose is really to bypass antivirus solutions, generate payloads to bypass antivirus solutions. Typically what people use it for, or even what threat actors use it for, are typically for generating backdoors that will evade antivirus on disk. That's what I've seen it used for the most from an operational perspective. So yeah, it's really a tool designed to bypass antivirus and to show that antivirus isn't the end all be all, and that you should be auditing your antivirus solutions to know what you can and cannot detect. So it's a similar idea with Great Scott of it's just focused on application whitelisting and the bypasses surrounding default application whitelist policies like AppLocker. Like AppLocker is really they call it it's one rule, like the AppLocker default rule, but it's really three rules in one. And that's something that I go over extensively in my talk at Circle City Con. That's recorded on YouTube, and can find it on irongeek.com.
So, Chris, are you trying to emulate the behavior and system calls and such of a whitelisted binary, or are you trying to bypass that whitelisting technology, or is it a combination of both?
I would still really say it's probably the latter, where it's an application whitelist bypass framework, where every single application whitelist bypass that has been discovered by a researcher, the goal is to catch them all. Hence, my talk name, Great Scott, gotta catch them all. So I'm trying to integrate all those into the framework. There's definitely some other efforts that I have in mind, like covering all the various ways or techniques of injecting shellcode, as an example, or providing a way to not only have let's say we want to use QUser APC for shellcode injection, but we want to use create remote thread for process injection. I want to provide that sort of capability. So it's kind of taking things like, if you're familiar with Red Canary's Red Team Atomic testing framework, it's not exactly the same thing. But if you look at some of the payloads that they have in there, like regsurf 32, for example, it's a very basic proof of concept that pops calc.exe, right? And it's great for developing baseline detections. It's a fantastic project. However, like there's nothing that really like comprehensively puts all of that together. These different methods
Right.
of shellcode injection, like even if let's say they decided to start putting, I don't think they'll ever do this, but they decided to start putting like shellcode injection in there. Those guys are smart enough to know like there's many different ways of doing that, and then there's also process injection that goes along with that, and many different techniques for that. So I think we have very different goals, and I'm really just focused around the application whitelist bypasses and providing as many unique payloads for that specific technique as possible. So if you go and you look at the framework and you look at all of the payloads within the framework, you'll see that like I've been going for comprehensive coverage, where like for example, with msbuild.exe, a Microsoft developer utility that compiles C# code essentially from an XML file in memory and executes it. In that case, I have custom interpreter stagers. There's shellcode injection. Now, like a lot of the proof of concepts from researchers that get released, particularly for shellcode injection with these application whitelist bypasses, is in memory, the thread that they're creating is read, write, execute. Now, I know for a fact that many, endpoint defense and readiness products look for read, write, execute in memory, especially with the prevalence of the anti-malware scanning interface. Although it doesn't focus on that, people are focusing. My point is like people are focusing way more on what's happening in memory on the system, and like that's kind of the point of the EDR product, right? To get visibility not only into what's going on disk, but what's in memory. And so when these payloads are read, write, execute, most EDR products will flag that. So, for example, most, if not all, of the payloads within the Great Scott framework are read, write, and then read, execute. So nothing in memory is read, write, and execute all at the same time. It's read, write when it needs to be, and it's read, execute when it needs to be. And it doesn't even really need to be read, execute. It could just be execute at the end, and it would be fine. So there's definitely still room for improvement there, right? But it's really just like focusing on the most prevalent techniques that are out there for red teaming and pulling it all into one place in relation to application whitelisting. So I think my tool is also useful for auditing the capabilities of an endpoint defense and readiness products. Definitely, you should check out something like the MITRE ATT&CK framework or Red Canary's atomic testing framework. But that is one of the things that that differentiates my project, and I do use my tool on engagements. It's been a while since I've actually used it because I've been stuck in web application land for a couple months. But in the next few months, I should be on a lot more red teams. So you should be seeing more development from me on that side. And there are a lot of very exciting future plans. We have a DerbyCon submission out there that I'm very excited about. It's still a work in progress. But one of the things that is going to happen in the future, and we're working on it right now, is merging Great Scott into the Vale framework. Mm-hmm. So that you have one comprehensive framework to kind of test these next-gen antivirus products, EDR products, application whitelist solution, whatever it may be. And one of the other plans.
That's awesome. Now, are you co-presenting with the others from the Vale project for this talk?
Yep. I did a submission with Chris Trunser, who's the current maintainer of the Vale framework, and pretty soon here I will also be a Vale developer like him, and have access to the main repo, and assuming that the DerbyCon talk is accepted, then we'll be releasing. I'm not sure what we're calling it yet. I'll say our private repository name is called Great Vale at the moment. Mm-hmm. We may just call it Vale. Right now I think Vale is at 3.1 or 3.0. We might call it Vale 4.0. We haven't discussed too much of like what the name of it is going to be. It's just we're merging it into Vale and adding new features. There's some really exciting features that we have planned that we're going to integrate on both sides. There's some things that are in Great Scott that are not in Vale that we're going to expose to the greater framework. And then, like, for example, any Vale PowerShell payload will be able to use any method from invoke obfuscation, because in the future, we will have every method of invoke obfuscation within the framework via open source PowerShell, similar to the way the Empire project does it, as an example.
But this is really important, especially the merging of these two products, to allow folks that work for enterprises or even smaller companies to test the effectiveness of their defenses. I mean, it's essentially what both of these projects have in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of the other really cool things that I have planned to, hopefully release at DerbyCon, assuming it gets accepted, is a generate all feature. And this would particularly pertain to Great Scott, but we might do something for the greater Vale framework as well. Still in discussions about that, but for at least for Great Scott or the application whitelist bypass portion of the Vale framework, it will essentially dynamically generate every single payload within the framework, every single bypass within the framework, and then use Metasploit UUID tracking. And I actually already have code for this. That's in the old version of Great Scott, if you look way back in the repo. So essentially, it's going to write this CSV file and then track which payloads worked and which ones didn't. One of the other things that I really like to do is write like a PowerShell script. The old code uses a batch script. However, a batch script can also be an application whitelist bypass in itself, so I kind of want to move away from that. So probably like a PowerShell script with like Pester, similar to like what Lee Holmes did for the Red Team atomic testing framework. So that way, like an analyst inside of a corporation or even a small business could go and generate all the payloads within the framework. It would automatically start Metasploiting all the listeners. They go over to the victim machine. They transfer the PowerShell script. They run it, and then they get a CSV file to know what they detected and what they didn't. What was successful and what wasn't, and compare it against, the defense tool console and see what it actually reported on, what it actually stopped, what it maybe just alerted on, and maybe they can shore up some processes surrounding the alerting that they have in the product. I mean, I think there's many different use cases for it, but it's really just to audit your ability to detect and respond to different techniques that are available.
Patrick, you seem intrigued. You have questions. I know your pen testing is your day job, so
I probably have so many questions about this kind of thing. And I even just kind of wanted to take it back to the beginning a little bit. Maybe if you could give us like a use case about where you might use this kind of thing, because I know you were talking about how you've been kind of stuck in web application land, and why necessarily would you not be using this while testing web applications and only in red team, or I think I saw in your description, blue team assessments? Maybe you can kind of talk us through just kind of a usage of Great Scott.
Sure. So you would never use it, or very, very rarely, and maybe in some niche use case, you might use it in a web application.
Yeah, like if you got shell on a Windows box, for example, right, through a web app, which is more rare today. When you're testing the app, it's more about the app functionality rather than getting to the OS. Although, as Chris is saying, it still does happen.
I guess maybe I was thinking if there's like a WAF in place, is just trying to get past that a little bit.
Yeah, and Great Scott wouldn't be used for that at all. It's primarily like right now it is all focused on Windows hosts, really. Yeah, so all your
payloads, Chris, are for Windows operating systems in both Vale and Great Scott, right?
Correct. I don't know about Vale. I think Vale might have some stuff
in
that
Linux,
would work on
maybe
Linux.
I
don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
But at least Great Scott, the application whitelist bypass portion of it, is all strictly Windows at the moment. Eventually, I want to expand into OS X and Linux. However, I want to get complete coverage for Windows first, since I feel like application whitelisting is much more prevalent in Windows, although it is still kind of niche in our industry. Not every client has it, but I have been running into it more frequently where they'll just deploy app locker with default rules. And so it's one of those things where, let's say I was doing a red team and I ran into a client that deployed app locker because we recommended to implement application whitelisting, and they did it. And that's amazing. Like, I'm so happy that they're taking our recommendations. Like, it feels good. Then, maybe they don't have all of the knowledge surrounding it, they don't know of these application whitelist bypasses. Like, they're just not privy to them. They're just not aware of them. And so in that scenario, I could use Great Scott to bypass their policy, and then afterwards tell them, like, hey, I use my tool to bypass application whitelisting that you implemented, but if you take my tool and use it and generate the payloads and audit your application whitelist policy, the next time we come in, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. There may be some new one that comes out, but that's part of doing application whitelisting and maintaining your policy. And I'm going to do my best to implement all the new application whitelist bypasses that come out, but I can't guarantee it.
Chris, do application whitelist companies, do they hate you? Do they love you? Do they ignore you? Like, how does that go?
To be honest, I haven't heard any feedback, good or bad, from application whitelist companies that have commercial products.
Okay, so if they're listening, please contact Chris and don't go the hate route. Go the collaborative route with researchers, as we've talked about on the show in the past, right?
I'll say, at least at Circle CityCon, when I ran into a few different individuals, I'm not going to name drop them or anything, but the particular individual that I'm thinking of worked for Carbon Black.
Sure.
And he was very interested in it and thought it was cool and wanted to test it against Carbon Black and like the default rules that they deploy for their product.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, you say that the vendors that we like to work with and the vendors that we hear from our audience that they like to work with are vendors that are very receptive to your research and want to improve their product. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and then I have other stories of, like, whenever I presented this at Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference. Again, I'm not going to call it names or a company name here, but I had a couple individuals in the audience that actually had implemented application whitelisting and weren't aware of these type of bypasses, and they kind of just had like an oh my,
yeah, like deer in the headlights look. Like my vendor that I bought this from didn't tell me that there was bypasses.
Yeah, and even in some cases, it was like they had implemented AppLocker from Microsoft, right? And they thought they had done their due diligence and done their homework on it and had implemented it properly. So I've had a few individuals like that reach out to me and say like they're actually using it to test to see if they can actually block some of these bypasses, and have been paying way more attention to the research that's coming out surrounding it. So for me, like, I think like mission accomplished. It's really about raising awareness surrounding this sort of tradecraft, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. I think especially with like the MITRE attack framework, it's really getting out there way more. I think I saw there was tons of submissions on MITRE attack framework from some of the reviewers on Twitter for DerbyCon. It seems to be a really hot topic. But,
it is, yeah, certainly.
That's something that like I'm not particularly focusing on. I'm focusing on trying to have realistic, weaponized bypasses in the framework that people can use to audit their ability to detect and respond to things or prevent it in the first place, pending what type of solution they have implemented versus application whitelisting versus some next-gen AV or EDR product or whatever it may be.
And don't get defensive. I mean, like you're saying, people we ran into that got defensive, they usually had now they get this tunnel vision situation, and they don't read what's going on, and you can never get complacent and think I've got it. We've got this. Marketing told us everything was perfect and it would never be broken. You have to keep reading the research and keep looking at what people are coming up with, because there's always just this spiral of things changing, and the minute you start thinking we're good, we're defensive, you're wrong. And
Well, and kind of like a spin on that, Doug, when a security vendor gets defensive, my first question after being in this industry 17 plus years is, what do you got to hide? Like every
course.
time I've seen a vendor like that get defensive
Absolutely.
about some kind of limitation in their product, I mean, vulnerability, limitation, whatever, sometimes it's even one of the two or both, but they've likely got something to hide.
Absolutely.
And John Strand at Black Hills InfoSec has been down this road, certainly with AV bypasses and such. And
but it is tough. I mean, I've
yeah.
made these presentations before to the board, and they're all sitting there. And if you start going, well, it's almost right, then they're like, what do you mean it's almost right? It's going to be 100%, right? It's going to protect us forever, and nothing will ever change. And we make this investment, and we're done, right? And you're going, well, not really.
I think largely, Doug and Chris, and the folks that are implementing these products and then adopting these frameworks to test them, they understand.
Oh yeah.
And I think even if you're adopting a product like. We've matured as an industry or as a community in my mind, such that we're very skeptical of our products and some of their limitations. Yep. And certainly the MITRE ATT&CK framework and other efforts like Atomic Red Team and Chris's project in Vale have helped us raise that level of skepticism with these products. So, and that's why, Chris, why I believe this is so important. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show is because we absolutely have to test the effectiveness of all our defensive solutions, and not just do that once, right? Like you got to do this over time,
forever.
And that's why, that's why, Chris, I like your framework.
Continuous.
Yeah, because it allows people to do that continuous testing and updating it, Chris, with the latest techniques is part of that. It's always a cat and mouse game, right?
Yep. And all of us have to keep kicking that up the ladder because we have to keep convincing all these people who have no idea what he just said. No idea what he just said. That we have to keep convincing them that this is not, you write us one check and this product will solve all your problems.
Yeah, like your endpoints are protected,
everything will never change.
It's unicorns and rainbows and
I see that. I see it over. I get calls like that all the time where they're saying, we were sold this product, we were sold this thing, it's a bunch of crap. They told us it was fine and then we got hacked a week later. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to keep addressing it. You have to keep looking and you have to keep scanning the industry and watching for what's happening. It just doesn't work like, here, I'm going to turn the lock and we're done and we can we're good. So I like what Chris is saying.
Chris,
go
ahead.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Doug, but I personally, as a pen tester or red teamer, I'm kind of tired of playing the cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to put everything I can out there.
Yeah.
Without making anyone angry with me.
I think if we could do more of that, we'd be better off.
I don't know if that was live or that shot was live or not. Like Chris had a visitor from his dog, which is awesome.
Oh,
we're very dog.
Sorry,
friendly.
I couldn't see.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All I can see is the bark.
I figured that was going to happen at some point, but she's been pretty good, and the other one doesn't really come on the camera or come by me
totally
on the computer.
Fine. She's like, why are you hogging the spotlight here? I need some
talk to me
some
now.
airtime on Security Week.
She's just wondering why I'm just sitting here talking and not paying attention to her.
Right. So Chris, the framework, Great Scott, free, open source. Anyone can go get it. It's on GitHub, right?
Yep. GitHub, it's live right now. GitHub.com/great-SCT/great-SCT.
And
but if you just go to github.com/great-SCT, it'll bring you to the organization page, and you'll be able to find it.
I really hope that you have the opportunity to merge the two projects, Vale and Great Scott, and present at DerbyCon. I think that would be awesome. I think there's many of us in the security field, myself included, that are anxiously awaiting the decisions from the committee at DerbyCon. I am told that they have made final decisions and that they are just working on the schedule, so we should hear soon. Those of us who submitted, hundreds and hundreds of submissions, and a fraction of that are only the ones that are going to be accepted. And I think it's important that we as a community support and hopefully they chose talks such as yours that are going to benefit the community. So, and we're all just anxious to see what's the content going to be at DerbyCon, which is awesome. So.
Yeah, and regardless of acceptance at DerbyCon, I mean, this is going to happen either way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Ideally, it happens at DerbyCon, and that's where we release it. It's my favorite conference. I've been there every year. I'm a huge fan of everyone that runs it. It's just
Yeah,
a
except
fantastic
for that
conference.
Dave character. He's kind of shady sometimes, but you know.
Yeah, he's a little shady sometimes. But
So, Chris, 5 questions with Security Weekly. Are you ready to play?
I guess so.
3 words to describe yourself.
Passionate, crazy, dog lover.
If you were to write a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Inside the mind of a conscious hacker.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Computers, I guess. Yeah.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First, for sure.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Or dogs.
That's a weird question.
That's the weird
That's
one.
a weird one. Okay, yeah.
Like, Ask Grabby Grabby, Chris was like,
No problem.
spot on. Like, yep, I have no idea what that is, but you know what?
Who doesn't go
Like he's
first?
right on that Ask Grabby Grabby
Right.
question, but it was like your parents. Oh, that's a weird question.
I've never had any desire for a celebrity to be my parents, so
They can be historical figures, philosophers,
Grace Hopper.
scientists, actor,
Yeah.
actress. It can be.
Let's say,
it's gender neutral,
Maybe
Chris.
if
We
you
don't
pick
judge.
Dave Kennedy, you get picked by.
You could pick Dave Kennedy.
Dave
There's no right or wrong answer here, Chris.
I'd say Nikolai Tesla and Grace Hopper.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. I want to encourage all of our listeners.
As if on cue.
She's like, I want to get back on camera. What's going on? So I want to encourage all of our listeners to check out Great Scott. And Chris, thank you so much for appearing on the show tonight.
Yep. Thanks for having me on, Paul.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back with the security news for this week. Get ready for a lively discussion coming up next.